I am so glad to be here to introduce this team. As many of you know, if you've been around CSD for some years, you know that for years we had 4 field reps. We had a study done in 2014 that said, you really need more field reps. Well, we were able to bring that to reality in 2022. So now we have a full staff of field reps, and they're connecting well with you. Make sure before this time is over, you really connect with them. They're excited about their work. They're excited about the mission of CSD, but they're also excited about your mission. And so we want to walk with you to accomplish your great mission. With that, take it away, team.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Wilmer, for that lovely introduction. We'll leave the first one out. Okay, so today we are providing an update on the 2023 monitoring season, including common monitoring findings, survey results, and the 2023 monitoring activities, which include the desk review, the scope of the on-site review, verification of outcomes and services, and other resources. While I'm sure that all of you have great questions, in the interest of time, we're asking that you save them until the end. We will be documenting all of the questions and the appropriate answers, and we will be sending them out to the network next week. Also, we will be sending out a PDF of this PowerPoint next week, and we will also be making a pre-recorded version of this PowerPoint also available on the local agency portal, aka the LAP. So our presentation objectives are to provide an overview of the 2023 monitoring season, or monitoring process, identify timelines for monitoring, review the monitoring tool, and discuss outcome validation expectations. So pardon me while I become really official. I'm going to sound like the first slide when you start a movie. Oh, wait, no. Caleb, how do I go back? This way? This way? There we go. Okay. All right. So, by federal statute, the state is required to conduct a full on-site monitoring review of each agency at least once in a 3-year period. CSD adheres to this statute and any additional monitoring activities as deemed as applicable. Annual reviews are conducted to assess organizational capacity in the areas of board governance, administrative standards, financial management, and program performance, and other applicable CSBG federal and state requirements. Due to COVID-19, CSD utilized a virtual review component to accomplish the intent of the mandated OCS review. OCS stated that agencies that participated in the virtual review have satisfied this every 3-year requirement, meaning that if you were monitored from 2020 to 2022, that counted towards your 3-year requirement. CSD conducted a survey of all agencies who received a monitoring visit in 2022. We are routinely looking for feedback to implement change in order to improve the monitoring based upon the feedback we receive. The survey questions were gathered towards the process implemented in 2022 and the agency's overall satisfaction with the monitoring activities. So here are a few areas in which CSD will focus on in 2023 to improve the monitoring process. Due to the feedback we received, CSD is currently working to ensure all of the links on the LAP are live and it has the most up-to-date forms and information. If you click on a link which does not work, please advise your field representative as soon as possible so that we can get all of those forms updated or make sure that the links are working. As you can see, the overall response from the 2022 modified monitoring process was positive, with 11 agencies reporting being very satisfied and 5 being satisfied. So please make sure to give us feedback in 2023, and we'll make sure to continue to improve. So with that, I'm going to kick it to Caleb so he can advise of common monitoring findings.
You guys love that phrase. Kick it to me, anyone. So in case anyone wasn't very satisfied, you didn't let us know. So remember to fill out the survey, or else we're just going to feel great about ourselves all the time, because that pie chart made us look awesome. This is a great slide, not that it's highlighting findings, so we're not saying, wow, amazing to highlight this, but it's very informative for you all, particularly the ones that will receive on-site monitoring. We better pop up to the next slide, Cynthia. I don't know why it just hopped away. We want to stick with the good stuff, although that is also good information. So anyways, this is information for you because it helps you be aware of what we're looking at, and particularly the things that were very common, and in hopes really that you can avoid some common pitfalls or things that occurred this past year. So we're reflecting on, in 2022, we monitored 22 agencies. This was modified monitoring because of the pandemic. So yay, 2023, we're back in person. So in the upcoming slide, you will get to see our friendly faces in person, in the flesh, and that should really transform our experience. But in 2022, we saw 15 findings. 15 findings were issued, 14 observations, and this is what was most common. So the most common is long-standing vacancies. I'm sorry, I'm sure you all know it's like beating a dead horse, but that's still a thing that we will always look at, and is very important they get filled. So long-standing vacancies were vacancies that were occurrent before the pandemic. So even though they're still in existence in 2022, that's why they were marked as a finding. Subcontractor monitoring not aligning with agency's policies. That's important that you follow your own policies when you're monitoring your subcontractors. And finally, agencies did not follow the contractual agreement with us, or CSD, to submit a pre-approval request when purchasing any equipment that costs $10,000 or more. Common observation, we had one. That was very common, which was the being unable to verify outcomes submitted on the CSBG annual report. So if you were lucky, as I hope you were, to be in the room just a second ago with our amazing friends at CSET, they were giving great information on how you can be very strong and powerful in your data. And that, just to come full circle, that was pretty common that we saw pitfalls there. And we understand it's very difficult, but that's where it comes full circle. We do review the numbers you submit in the annual report. Lastly, others. So that'd be board vacancies that occurred during the pandemic. We had another category because it was the pandemic, and we've had that as a caveat up and through this year of 2022. So here, in case you forgot where you were 3 years ago, these are the lucky few that will see us in the flesh. So here's our list. Right here, look for your name, look for your lucky community action agency, and what have you. Know that if you haven't been contacted already, you will be contacted by your field rep to schedule that time in 2023. That, like I said, we will be coming to you. So there's this list, there's one more, so this is not in total. Want to make sure you see it. And again, we're going to send this out. So in case you feel like you saw yourself and then we move on from this slide, we will make sure that you know we're on your way. Okay, you can go on the next one now. All right, so this is just a couple of things similar to those pitfalls, but things that you're going to want to know. And Lily was just giving me grief about this within the hour. Is yes, February 1st is when the annual reports are due. So February 1st, annual reports are due. On-site monitoring, these are just things for you to be aware of in the year. So on-site monitoring occurs between April and September of 2023. While desk reviews occurs between June and October. So anyone who doesn't receive on-site monitoring, we conduct a desk review. We communicate with you a little bit about that, and it has a lot to do with what we have already in-house. Community action plans, this is a cap year. That's due June 30th. And then organizational standards, just like this past year, are due no later than August 31st, even though the portal is open as soon as June 1st. So next slide, the next two are just to highlight some of the things I just said. So desk reviews between June and October, and then particularly really want to highlight the annual report is due February 1st. That one's right, it's Christmas, or the holiday season is right upon us, which means annual report is basically due, is what it feels like. So best of luck. But anyways, that's really a number of things that are pretty important to know. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty about our actual on-site monitoring process. So, thanks.
All right, thanks, Caleb. So since Brenda wanted to give you a little bit of my resume, I'll fill in a little bit more. I was a secondary school teacher also, so I'm going to fight. So I have a soft side. I'm going to fight the urge to start walking down the aisles since I want to stay near the mic. So at this point, we have set the table, and now we're really ready to dive into the meat of the monitoring process. So I want to begin with giving you a broad overview of the process, and then we'll fill in some of the details so that you can know what to expect and how to prepare. So within the next 2 months, if they haven't done so already, your field rep will be reaching out to you to schedule those key events of your monitoring visit. You'll schedule the date and the time for your entrance conference, and at that conference, your field rep will discuss the key takeaways of their review up to that point. They'll also talk about the things that will need to be accomplished during the on-site visit, such as program reviews, site program visits, and then any additional document reviews. Given the wide-ranging nature of that discussion, it'll be important to schedule that entrance conference for a time when your executive director, your program manager, CFO, and any other key staff that you think can contribute to that conversation will be available. And we certainly encourage you to invite any staff or board members that you think can contribute to that conversation. After the entrance conference, the on-site visit itself will then take about 1 to 2 days. And during that time, the field rep will engage in program visits, interviews, and potentially additional document review and reviewing your processes. Finally, the on-site visit will conclude with an exit conference where your field rep will make note of any noteworthy practices, and then also identify any areas of concern or deficiencies that might require corrective action. Also, if your agency has any training or technical assistance needs that we can assist you with, that we can connect you to other resources, that will also be discussed at that time. Then, within 3 weeks of the end of your on-site visit, your field rep will email a draft version of your monitoring report to your agency's executive director. Your agency will then have a week to review and comment on that report. After that comment period, your field rep will then provide you with the final version of the monitoring report, along with a monitoring satisfaction survey, the results of which for last year you just saw a moment ago. And so this gives you an opportunity to give feedback on the process so that we can improve. So that's the broad overview of the monitoring process. Now we really want to dive into some of those details so that you can be in the best position to succeed during your monitoring visit, because that's really what we want. This isn't about trying to catch you or blindside you. We want you to be prepared. So if we just step back for a second, you've scheduled the time for your monitoring visit in that April to September timeframe that Caleb mentioned a moment ago. So 45 to 60 days prior to your entrance conference, your field rep will provide you a letter that reiterates the timing of your visit and also includes a document request, an initial set of document requests. You'll then have 2 weeks to respond to that first request for documents. I know now I'm starting to sound like the lawyer, so to look at the specifics of that letter, to look at some of the items that you'll need to provide. The documents that we request here really serves as the foundation of our review. So to look at some of the specific documents, you'll be asked to provide policies and procedures, such as your cost allocation and procurement policy on the fiscal side. You'll need to provide your child support referral literature and policies. If your agency receives a working capital advance on your CSBG allocation, that 25% advance repayment, if you receive that, documentation confirming that those funds are retained in a interest-bearing account will need to be provided. For agencies with subcontractors, you'll need to provide a current CSD 163 subcontractor list, your policies and procedures for subcontractor oversight and monitoring, and any desk reviews or monitoring reports that you developed over the last year for our review. To allow for a review of your tripartite board, you'll need to provide your current CSD 188 board roster, any outstanding board meeting minutes, and your agency bylaws if they've been submitted, if they've been updated or amended since your last submission. We'll also ask for examples of your outreach literature so that we can see how you're informing the public and making them aware of your CSBG programs. And then we also will need the list of individuals who are currently registered to access the local agencies portal. Now we can go to the next slide. There we go. So the last step in that initial document request is actually the first of two requests related to your agency's expenditure and F&PI reporting. Your field rep for this stage will identify a number of F&PIs and expenditure line items for testing based on the size of your agency's CSBG allocation. So for example, for agencies with allocations of less than $300,000, you'll need to provide your general ledgers, subledger details supporting 2 line items, and then client file lists for 3 F&PIs. For agencies with allocations between $300,000 and $1 million, we can actually stay on that slide, that's great. The field rep will identify 3 line items and 4 F&PIs for review. And then for agencies with the big bucks of over $1 million, the field rep will identify 4 expenditure line items and 5 F&PIs for review. Now we can go to the next slide. So for the F&PI portion of the review, you'll need to provide a client file list that actually shows the individuals that achieved the outcomes reported in your annual report. So if, for example, your agency reported 55 outcomes on F&PI 1B, the number of unemployed adults who achieved employment up to a living wage, you'd simply need to provide the list of the 55 individuals that actually achieved that outcome. On the expenditure side of things, you'll need to provide the general ledgers and the subledger details that cover each requested line item. So in the example that we have here on the next slide, you can see that we're looking at an agency with one of those allocations between $300,000 and $1 million, and the field rep has reviewed the EARS year-to-date summary for this contract and identified the 3 line items that are highlighted for testing. Now, like I mentioned, the expenditure and F&PI review is a 2-step process. So after your field rep has reviewed the general ledgers, the subledger details, and the client file list that you've submitted as part of that first request, they'll reach out to you with a second request where they will identify 3 transactions under each one of these line items. So in this case, you would have a total of 9 transactions identified, and 3 client files under each F&PI. Your agency will then have a week to respond with the client files and the actual life cycle transaction support that substantiate the outcomes that you reported and the expenditures that you submitted. So to talk more about that phase 2 of the document review process, I will turn things over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, James. Okay, James went over quite well what is expected in phase 1. Seems like a lot. Then there's phase 2. Phase 2 is not so daunting. It shouldn't be too daunting, but it's just that deeper dive so we can see exactly how you can support your outcomes. So phase 2, or the deeper dive, as some of us call it, begins with life cycle testing of an expenditure. In the past, many have asked us, what is life cycle testing? Life cycle testing represents the process of reviewing expenditure documentation
from the initial point of the purchase request through the reconciliation of said purchase, which can be validated with an item such as a canceled check or a copy of a reconciled check. So like this example shows, life cycle testing begins with the request, then the initiation of that request, the actual purchase, the payment for that purchase, and finally, proof the purchase has been properly reconciled. The field representative will review backup documentation to ensure those purchases align with the approved budget, that proper signatures were attained for those purchases, and that the purchases were made and reconciled according to the agency's procurement policy, cost allocation plan, and indirect cost rate. Before I go into the second part of phase 2, this might look somewhat familiar to all of you. I'm going to take it back to 2021 when we implemented the 641 A&B worksheet. 641 A&B worksheet is utilized to gather agency outcome projections and targets. CSD is going to use this again for 2023. The following slides are examples of approved 641 A&Bs, which provide acceptable indications of what the agency will be utilizing for verification documentation. This slide is an example of an approved 641B Module 4 worksheet, which indicates the agency's target projections and what verification documentation will be used to validate future outcomes for this Module 4 FNPI employment indicators. Before we go to the next slide, I just want to see on column C here, it's case notes, employment and income documentation is used for all of those categories. It is okay to repeat yourself on this side because we are just looking to see that you do understand that we are going to check these items when we pull those FNPIs and we get those numbers. This is the type of documentation we want to see so you can truly support those outcomes. The next slide is another example of a different section for the 641B Module 4 worksheet. As you can also see, this agency indicates that they will be using pre and post tests, impact reports, and to validate their future outcomes for education and cognitive development indicators. Quick side note on anything that requires testing, make sure you have those tests in place before you go into reporting these outcomes, because we want to see from the initial point that you were providing this service that you're able to show us how the service has helped that client, because that's the main point of why we do this. So we're not trying to be, so regulatory all the time. We want to see the entire process that you go through, and this is how we can do that. If you have any questions regarding projections or documentation which substantiates the validity of these outcomes, you can just contact us and we will help guide you through it. After the projected targets are submitted, each agency is required to report their outcomes from the previous year into Community Software Group's eGov Reporting Hub. This is where the second part of this phase 2 begins. The field representative will review the list or other documents submitted by the agencies, and we will select the client files to review here. The data submitted for the client file review must include your agency's proof the outcome was actually achieved. CSD does not prescribe what type of tools must be used to validate these outcomes. The agency should have your own tools in-house to substantiate these outcomes. A few examples of tools to verify outcomes are listed on this slide. Pre and post testing is there so it can establish a firm benchmark to measure the growth of that client. Progress scales can include assessment language such as in crisis, vulnerable, safe, building capacity, empowered, and the website listed here also provides questionnaires and scales which can be utilized to assist agencies with their progress and capture that progress. Okay, a couple more examples here. This list you're now viewing displays other examples of the types of documentation which would support the validity of the reported outcomes. If anyone has any other questions, you could also go to that great CSG website under guidance. You can look under there. There are Module 4 instructions and guidance books that are there for your convenience, and you can click the links that are in there as well. And with that, I'm going to send it over to Ms. Sheila to discuss how to prepare for your monitoring visit.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Can you guys hear me? I hope So as you can see, we have quite an extensive list of documents that we'll be reviewing for an upcoming monitoring visit. And with that said, we know preparing for your monitoring visits, it could be very overwhelming, daunting, maybe cause a little bit of anxiety. So we have made it a little easier for you. We put together a guide or a checklist that you all can utilize to get ready for your monitoring visit. So as discussed and shared by my colleagues, you will be notified in advance so you can be prepared and have ample time to get ready for us. So as you can see, there are a lot of documents. So something to note is bullet number 5. Take an assessment of your agency and make sure that you're ready for us to come out. There are a lot of documents here, so you want to just go through them all, make sure you have everything prepared for us. And if you do that now, you'll be ready. Everything should go smoothly, okay? Also, you'll see the last few are CPNs or, excuse me, the program notices, and you'll be able to find these on the CSD agency portal, or better known as the LAP. Being familiar with the tools offered and understanding the CSD agency portal is important. So that's another key bullet to notate, is getting familiar with tools offered by CSD. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to just talk about the monitoring tool for your reference. This tool has been posted on the CSD agency portal under the CSBG monitoring tab. So next slide, please. So here it is, our monitoring tool review. This is something that your field agents use as a checklist or a guidance tool as we get ready for your monitoring, upcoming monitoring process. We use this as our guidance, or a checklist as and we'll complete it as we go through. Initially, as my colleague said, you'll be notified in advance of your upcoming monitoring, and then we will begin the process. We will be requesting items listed and then reviewing the documents from this list as we proceed through the monitoring activity. Items will be checked off as we complete each task, and if further information is needed or we need further clarification, we will reach out to all of you so we can complete that. Once we have checked off all of the boxes and the reviews are complete, we know we have accomplished a complete and thorough and fair assessment of all of our agencies. And just a reminder, you may also find this on the local agency portal, and we encourage you all to use this as another guidance tool to get ready for your upcoming monitoring visit. And with that, I'd like to pass this off to Patrick for the monitoring report.
Thank you, Sheila. Hi, everyone. All right. So, the monitoring reports are drafted and sent to the agencies for review within 3 weeks of the monitoring. Agencies will have around 1 week to review the monitoring report and address any issues that were identified. Some of the areas covered in the monitoring report are an analysis of the board meeting minutes, the results of the expenditure review, and the results of the programmatic performance review. The report may also cover the corrective action required to mediate any deficiencies. Also, following the issuance of the final draft, CSD will distribute a monitoring survey to gather feedback on the monitoring review process. Your feedback is important to us. The survey not only provides immediate feedback for this year, but will certainly assist our monitoring practices into the next year and beyond. So we just want to pause here for a second to bring up some issues which have impeded the monitoring process in the past. So first, please make sure your contracts are fully executed and you've emailed your field rep the appropriate deliverables. If you are unclear as to why your contract isn't executed, reach out to your field rep ASAP. And I know we mentioned earlier acronyms, that's as soon as possible. As you know, expenditures are due by the 25th of each month. Doing so ensures contracts are expended on time and that agencies are reimbursed in a timely manner as well. Board meeting minutes are due within 30 days of approval. This is a contractual requirement, and you could receive a corrective action for failing to do so. Of course, recently, some exceptions were made due to problems associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, but hopefully you have adapted and are able to hold meetings again, either virtually or socially distanced. For CSBG contracts, agencies will submit the CSD Form 715 and the CSD 626 final report. These forms, and many more, can be located on the local agency portal. We've talked about it a lot, but just in case you are unfamiliar with accessing forms on the LAP, the local agency portal, some quick instructions for you. You'll log into the local agency portal at agencies.csd.ca.gov, and you will click Log In to the local agency portal. With me so far. That part's good. Okay. At the top center section of the web page, you'll click on CSBG. And then on the next page that pops up, also in the top center of the page, you'll click on Forms. You can use the Search CSBG Forms section to search for specific forms or review the list of forms listed just below that section. At the bottom right of the forms list, there's an arrow key. You can use the right arrow key to click through to view more forms. And then if you passed it, you can use the left one to go back. Just browse as your heart desires. Let's see. That's it for that one. Next slide. So on behalf of the entire CSD Field Operations Unit, we would like to thank you for your cooperation, and we look forward to continued collaboration together. And with that, we are going to have a Q&A section, which is very exciting. Just to sweeten it a little bit, for the first 5 questions we receive, you're going to get a secret prize. So, if you have a question, there's a question.
Are you going to share those slides? Never.
Yes. Jenny is very protective of them, but we will do it.
Lily.
Yeah.
What if you have 5 questions?
You don't get all 5.
I won't call on you.
Are you gonna give her?
Yes, I'll go do it right now.
Brenda does not get all 5 prizes.
Okay, let's go in the back. Lucy. No, I can hear. We can hear you. I'm jotting them down. Okay.
We're going to want to repeat the question as well because we're going to copy all of these and send them out to you in an FAQ list. Oh man, I did an acronym. Frequently asked questions. $5. Okay.
Right, so just to summarize the question, you were asking if you have a subcontractor, do you submit the monitoring reports with the verification documents for your FNPIs? And the answer to that would be that for the FNPI request, you're submitting documentation that verifies things like that the client was income eligible for CSBG and that they actually got to a point where they achieved the outcome that you were claiming on your annual report. For the subcontractor piece, that's something that would be handled during that initial request where you'll provide your CSD 163 subcontractor list, your policies for subcontractor oversight, and then the actual monitoring reports themselves. And that's just a little separate review of your process.
Thank you, Lucy.
Brenda.
So, do you want me to take breaks in between my questions or ask
One at a time, please.
With breaks or without? Okay, I'm just gonna ask all my questions. For the F and P, like you use the example of employment. So some of those lines were 35 people. What percentage of those line items will you be pulling?
If we pull that FMPI and you have reported 35 individuals, we're gonna ask you to give us a list of those exact 35 individuals. Because you should only be reporting in your annual report what client has actually received that outcome. Yeah, so it won't be a percentage. Yeah, that's true, and we've pulled lists like that before. We try to be kind, but, yeah.
Go low.
We want you to report high.
Okay, then can you do a little bit more explanation, because this is always a source of confusion at my agency, and maybe we're an island, but the child support referral documentation.
Okay.
I mean, we have, an 80-year-old woman in the homeless shelter, and we get asked for the child support referral documentation. Well, that's a waste of money. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, legit, I just want to know the process and what you're looking for, and is it 100% if it doesn't make any sense?
You should just have a policy in place. If somebody
Okay.
is not an 80-year-old woman that walks in and just has a question about child support, you want to make sure that you know exactly what you're going to do to refer her to the place she needs to go. So the best practice for that would be to have either a written policy or at least something in a procedure somewhere within your agency where you can refer back to that, especially if you have even a new employee that comes on board and they ask, well, what do I do when somebody asks me about child support? And then you would say, well, this is our policy. So it's a best practice for each agency to at least have that in their back pocket, and that's what we are asking for. In the past, it was just literature.
Right.
It is a best practice, and there's a CAP law that I know I sent it to you guys. But there is a website that you can go to that has frequently asked questions about this, and we would be more than happy to send that out to anybody who needs it as well. Just reach out to us. I think Wilmer wants to add
Yeah,
something to this as well.
Let me just kind of give some advice. I think something that may be kind of easy that will kind of help you in that. In your intake process, when you do your intake, if there's just a checkbox that you have on your form that you have covered that, and you have your policy, you've covered that, we see that, we get real happy. I mean, we get real happy about things like that.
We actually share our child support policy.
Yeah.
I know our rep requested it, we submitted it, so we can share it with everyone, because if it doesn't apply to the home, obviously it's just,
It does, exactly.
doesn't apply. So if
Yeah.
you have a policy, we'll be willing to share it if you need it.
Okay, that'll be fine. Yeah, and another thing right here, you didn't ask it, but so I'm taking one of Britta's questions right now. She didn't ask it, but I'll say it anyway. One of the things that we're looking at, we are going to make sure that our monitoring portion of the LAP is updated. We're going to that because we're going to ask you that also. So we're going to make sure that we keep ours updated. And then one of the areas that we will try to set aside is examples of, various tools that the agencies use so that then you can go look there and pull things there as examples. So those are things.
Last question. We know that every year there's target areas that CSD looks at for pulling expenditures. What are those?
Brenda, who told you that?
I've been doing this longer than you've been alive, I think.
I love you. Thank you.
Technically, there's not.
Longer than Jennifer's been alive.
Yeah. Okay. That.
I'll take it.
Actually, if you're thinking about areas that we potentially may go and look at, equipment purchases, out-of-state travel, we're always going to look at things like that. Your subcontractor costs, we're always going to look at that. And usually we're looking at high-value things. And again, just to make sure. Now, also during what we have done, and now going back to our normal processes for 2023. Now, when we look at your general ledger and we're looking for things to pull, we may pull a low dollar item just to make sure you're chasing your process. That's what may do. And again, you see our monitoring tool, we send that out to you. We say, don't fill it out. It's a guide to what and where the field rep is going to go. So we're very transparent about that. So it's not like we're then gotta, we're really friendly, and all of a sudden somebody pulls out their phone and says, ask him this. No, that's not it at all. So we're right up front about what we're going to ask. We tell you all of the things, everything. We're really, really transparent about this process. Again, this is not, if I had more time, but my team only gave me a minute and a half. But anyway.
You went past it.
Yeah. This is not, believe me, this is not an I got you process. If we were to kind of talk more about the role of field ops, and it's all presented in our state plan, and you'll see it again next year as we reiterate the role. Our role is to come alongside. We are compliance, but we're coming alongside. We have the privilege of looking at, each of these folks have the privilege of looking at 10 agencies. And like, Lucy brought up, there are so many promising practices from each of your agencies serving your context that actually translate to another area. And so these guys get to see it. And so they are continuously, and many of you, they've asked, do we have permission to share this or share that? That's what we're doing. So again, this is not a I got you process. We're coming alongside. You're serving Mrs. Jones, but and her family, we're coming alongside of you as you serve Mrs. Jones and her family. So that's, I think, again, most of our formal CSD letters include the statement, partners in poverty. Believe me, that's what we're doing. So, thank you.
Were there any other questions? I think we have 3 solid. No, oh, I see right here. I can't see you.
Yeah.
Hello, Claudia.
Hi. When
Claudia?
will the recorded presentation be made available of this presentation?
Next week.
Next week? Okay.
We don't have a set date yet, but it will be available.
That's our
Yes.
goal, yeah.
Goal is next week.
And
Jenny.
Thank you. Just for clarification, the 2023 monitoring is for the 2022 report and data?
Correct. That is correct.
Great question.
You got it. Yeah.
So just to be clear, yeah, you're absolutely correct. Just to be clear, we will be looking at care services, just so you know. There's no CARES MPIs, but we definitely will be looking at care services, just so you know that. Okay, all right. And we love those care stories.
Or videos, right?
Or
Or videos.
I think this part of the process is what a lot of us love most, because it might be, like we said, it might be a bit daunting for all the agencies, but this is how we as a state can see what you guys are doing. We love the stories. We love pulling the client. We love pulling the client files. We want to know what's going on, because we don't have, boots on the ground like you guys do at certain times. And this is our way of saying, "Ooh, look what we can do too. We're trying to help. We're all just trying to help." So please don't look at it like we're coming at you. We just want to help come alongside you and help our low-income communities. Are there any other questions?
We have 1 minute.
Dun, dun, dun.
I just want to say thank you so much. I've been with Community Action since 2000. I will tell you, I work with so many reps, and I'm just very grateful to this team. You're phenomenal. I think, Wilmer, thank you for giving context. I didn't realize that you had to request additional positions, and that makes sense. But this is probably one of the best teams, and I just want to say thank you for going the extra mile.
Thanks, Lucy.